Alan, great to be here with you.
Good to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
Oh, for sure. I'm so excited. I've heard a little bit of your story. I feel like some people on the internet have heard a little bit of your story as well, but you made a promise that you're going to go to a place that you've never gone before and share your story in a certain way. So I'm stoked for our conversation today.
Now you're getting me nervous. Yes, I'm excited. I haven't fully shared the story, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. It'll be a lot of fun.
And I think my favorite part about this is you're all about the journey of a man into his power. And I've seen you help others, but more specifically, the fact that we get to talk about your story means we get to learn how you got into your power, which for me is
Yeah.
kind of ironic because a lot of people think that you've always been like this. You've always been a good speaker. You've always been good with women. You've always been successful, but that very much isn't the case at all. So tell us how all of this started.
It's funny you say that because a lot of people have said that to me over the journey. The reason why it started is because I had a recognition and realization of how low I was on the society totem pole, how low I was in comparison to just about everyone else. I was 24, 25. I was living in a rundown apartment in California, broke, paying 200 bucks a month in rent, sharing a room with a drug dealer, and it was the cheapest rent I could find on Craigslist. So to be able to have a room you share for 200 bucks is nothing in California. I was working a factory job, I was working a restaurant job and going to college at that time. And yeah, it was just recognition of if I don't change something, my future is not looking very bright.
I'm just gonna have to stop you there because I feel like a lot of people thought that you may have gone the traditional route of getting into university, graduating from your program, being a really good business person, and just going into corporate right away. And hearing the fact that did a factory job that was late at night and we're working in restaurants doing multiple scrappy things, that's just not how I see you, which I think is really
Yeah.
interesting. And you share this picture of yourself that you took in your mid 20s in the program, and I remember just laughing because when you shared that picture with us, you were saying, guys, in this moment, I was so proud. I had just worked out. I thought I was jacked, but it was this picture of you kind of being scruffy and a little bit chubby. Tell us about
Yes.
when that happened.
Yeah, that was probably around 24. I don't know the exact age, and I had just moved from the drug dealer apartment, not my drug dealer. I wasn't doing drugs. The drug dealer apartment, I was too broke to do drugs. To living with a good buddy of mine, and we had a small little apartment. I think we were each paying 450 bucks a month in rent, and so I'd really scaled up at that time. And and I had been working out for like 30 days in a row or something at that time, and so I took a picture in the mirror and wasn't in shape. Still driving a 1983 Camry that was all beat up, but I was on the path. I was on the path to be getting better at that time, and so I took that picture of myself because I felt in my own mind right then, I'm like, I'm jacked. I'm getting in shape. Things are changing finally. I'm in a nice apartment. I've been working out for 30 days. So that was kind of the first progress pic so far of me when I started to get on my journey of personal development.
And that makes a lot of sense because it's your path into your power. But here's what I don't understand, Alan. That version of you and this version of you just doesn't seem like it's relatable at all. So why were you like that then, or how did you get to where you are now? Because something
Yeah.
definitely isn't the same.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of transformation between that time and now, 10 years ago or so, but the transformation happened pretty quick. And for me at that time in my life, I had a lot of epiphanies in that year. And in particular, one of the epiphanies I had is for multiple years, I was trying to get an office job. For a lot of people, their dream is like a yacht and girls on it and making millions of dollars a year. Like at that point in my life, my dream was like, let me get a 9 to 5 job. If I can get that, I'm financially safe. And I grew up to two awesome parents. They were missionaries, but there's always massive financial instability in our home. My dad was an entrepreneur, kind of going from different job to job, but never really quite cracking the code. And so there's times when I was in high school, my mom would be like, "Hey, can you borrow lunch money from your friends this week? We don't have any money to give you. We love you." And so there's a lot of love, but just not a lot of like security and safety financially. And I'm super sensitive, so I was feeling all of that. And so what happened to me, I was never a good student. I was never studious. I never thought I was smart. And so at that time in my life, it was like, if I can just get an office job, if I can make $40,000 a year, like I'll finally be safe. And so that was kind of the goal for me at that time. And the goal I was really striving for actually 2 years, from like 22 and a half to around 24 when I finally got the office job.
That's fascinating because one of the things that you have a reputation about is just being very mentally tough. And it
Mm,
sounds like at that time of your life, you weren't there mentally at all. It almost sounds like you had victim mentality of some kind. Talk to us
yeah.
about like that part of your life, how you were thinking, how you were operating, because we're obviously going to get into the transformation, but it's really good to hear your before.
Yeah, I was complete victim mentality. I was on antidepressants on and off at that time. I'm short. I'm 5'6" and a half. And when you're under 6 foot, you say the halves too, you know. So I'm 5'6" and a half. So I
Absolutely.
just felt like at that time, I'm like, I grew up in a really interesting place. I went to high school in a very wealthy part of California. We weren't wealthy, but I went to high school there, and I always felt like we were different and we were outcast. And I missed a number of years in elementary school, so I didn't feel I was intelligent, and I was mad at my parents for that. So there was all these reasons on why I wasn't successful. I'm short, that's why I'm not getting girls. I'm broke because my parents are broke and because I'm not good at school. It was just like there's all these stories playing all the time in my life that were giving me the excuses rather than looking in the mirror and saying that I can actually transform my life. I didn't believe it. I wanted to blame everyone else. I wanted to be angry at my parents. I wanted to be angry at girls because girls are shallow and they only want a certain type of guy. So that is the energy I operated in the world from. And the energy that came back to me was that I'm broke. I'm living in a rundown apartment. I'm driving a 1983 Camry. I'm making no money. And my body's out of shape. It's just a reflection of the man I was at that time.
Mm. And it's so interesting because I see people in the victim mentality, which I was in myself, and there's a delusion that if we just tried a little bit harder, we might be able to get the thing that we really desire. In this case, it was an office job, and it
Yes.
felt like you were probably still in that mentality a little bit, but you were able to get that job. Can you tell us more about that story?
Yeah, well, at the time, I'm working all these different jobs. So I'm going to class in the morning, and then I'm working at a restaurant until the afternoon, going to class in the early evening, then going to a warehouse job, a t-shirt factory at night. And so I had a recognition that like I have no time at all. I was like a hamster on a wheel from job to this to that to homework. It was just like I had no time. And so the only thing I could look at is I have a certain amount of hours in a day. I need to make more money. I need to make more money than minimum wage or a dollar more than minimum wage. And that was like my initial goal. And so at that time, what I found is that there was an office job, a technology company in that city. And I heard that if I could get a job doing digital marketing, I can make $60,000 a year potentially. So at that time, I'm like,
Whoa.
dude, I'm making $8 or 7.55 or 8.25, whatever the minimum wage is. Like, if I could make $30 an hour, $25 an hour, $40 an hour, like, boom, life is transformed. And so that was my safety net. That was my life vest. That was the only thing I knew because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I didn't think I had any skills. So I just said, let me get a job doing this, and then life will be better.
Mm. And so you got the job. Please tell me that you just like thrived and you skyrocketed because that must have been a big confidence boost. You got the job that you really wanted to get.
Well, the funny thing is, I tried to get the job for 2 years. And so from like 22 to 24, I was trying to get a job at this exact company. And so I was
Wow.
doing everything I could. I knew someone on the team there. They brought me in for an interview. I had no experience, no skill, probably didn't interview well. They didn't hire me. I messaged the hiring manager, the manager of the department. I said, like, hey, what can I do? He said, you got to learn more about digital marketing. So I said, okay, there's one course online at this time about digital marketing. I saved up for another 4 months. I spent $4,000 to buy the course. So, like, all the money I had, $4,000 to buy the course. Then I took the course, and then I saw he had another role that opened up. Then I went back to him and I said, hey, I've taken the course. I got a 97 out of 100. Like, I want the job. I interviewed with him again. He didn't hire me. And then I'm like what, all my money's gone, like what the hell, what do I have to do? And so at that point it was the decision of this is the only option I have, or restaurant and factory jobs. I'm gonna get a job here. And so 3 4 months went by. I saw he was hiring again. I emailed him a bunch. What can I do to make sure I get the job next time? He told me a bunch of things. I showed up again. I did the interview. I crushed it with the team. I knew my stuff. 2 weeks later, he emails me and goes, "Hey, I hired someone. I hired someone else."
Oh.
And I
Oh.
remember at this point, I was just like, first of all, fuck this guy. Like, fuck you. I've taken a course you told me I should take. I've done all this.
Yes.
It's been like a year now. And I was so mad, but I decided, I said, okay, well, I'm in this little city in California. I have no other option.
Mm.
Let me get a job here. And so I put my ego aside, and it took about another 6 months of saving, 8 months of saving. And I showed up at the office one day, and I called him from the secretary's desk, and he picked up, and I'm like, "Hey, it's Alan Howard." He's like, "Who?" Not a good sign, right? And I said, "Hey, it's Alan Howard. I've applied here 3 times." "Oh, Alan, yeah, how you doing?" And I said, "Good. Can I talk to you for a moment?" And he said, "Yeah." So him and I ended up having a chat. And I said, like, "I want to work here, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to work here. And so I've saved enough money for 3 months of work. I want to work full time for you. And by the end of the 3 months, if I've done well, I want you to hire me." And so at this time,
Damn.
he's like, "Okay, damn, this dude doesn't stop. It's been a year and a half. This guy's just like hounding me down." And so he ends up hiring me for those 3 months. I work my ass off as much as I can, spend all the money I have to my name. I think I even took out some student loans to pay for some of it. And then, yeah, I got the job at the end of it. And so finally, I had reached my goal of getting an office job, of, making decent money at that time, feeling good. And so it was the first mountain that I climbed.
First of all, kudos for that kind of strategy, because that is like world class sales right there, in my opinion. Being able to talk somebody into a strategy of how you can get what you want and being willing to show value upfront before you got the commitment from them. That's just really brilliant, almost very entrepreneurial of you. So props to you
For
for
sure.
that. But I'm so curious because clearly you performed well in that period of time for you to get that job. How did you continue to progress in that job? How did you continue to just like grow in your skill set with that?
Well, what's funny is the identity I held about myself is I'm someone unintelligent. And I didn't get good grades in school. I barely made it through. I was only able to get into university because I had help with wrestling. And so the identity I held was someone who doesn't stick to his word, doesn't get his stuff done. And so it didn't translate well into an office job. Like, they liked me. I had a good
Mm.
personality with them. I was fun, but I wasn't getting my work done. And so what happened after the first like 9 months is my boss called me into the office, and this is the
Oh,
holy grail for me. This is
oh,
heaven
wow.
for me. I
Yeah,
finally have
yeah.
a job. I don't have to go at night to a factory. I don't have to do restaurant stuff. Like, I have a job that pays me well.
Yes.
And he pulled me into his boardroom this one morning. It was like in December, rainy day. I show up a little later, and he pulls me into the office and says,
Oh
"Hey,
no.
come talk with me."
Yeah.
And we get in there, and he closes the door. He tells me to sit down. I sit down, and his demeanor just changes immediately. I just see it. Like, he's
Oh,
like,
wow.
go lucky with me. And then he's just like looking at me, and he's intense. Former drug dealer in Boston, became like very successful in corporate America. Good buddy of mine over this
Mm.
time, but intense guy. And he looks at me and he goes, "Do you want me to fucking fire you?" And I remember, because here I am, I've spent 2 years to get this job, right? Like,
Yeah.
I spent all the money I've earned, and
What?
it's like, "You want me to fucking fire?" And it was just like, my heart was in my stomach. And I remember just being
Oh.
like, "No, that's the last thing I want." I could barely speak, right? And then he looks at me, and this was the moment that everything really changed. You've been asking about my journey, what really happened,
Mm.
what progressed. It was me seeing through the illusion of my own identity about myself.
Mm.
And so at this moment, he said, "You are the smartest person on this team, but you act like and believe you are the dumbest.
Oh,
Why?"
wow.
And that moment for me was a total shock, because the identity I held of myself was definitely not the smartest person on the team. I always thought I was the last person in any group that I was in. And for him to reflect that and say that and show to me, and then he proved it to me and said, like, this and this and the way clients respond and that, He said, "You're sabotaging yourself." And he was completely right. He was
Wow.
completely right. And so that night in December, I went home, my cold little apartment, and it was the first time I had to face the difference between the identity I held about myself and how the world
Mm,
perceived me.
wow. That must have been just like a shock to your system, because the shattering of that illusion, I mean, a person holds on to their identity very strongly. I would almost imagine it being like in a car accident or something, having that conversation with him must have just shaken you so much. What did you do when you got home?
Yeah, completely. It's been years now. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I remember one thing I did that night. I got a spreadsheet open because I was
Mm.
using spreadsheets with my work. And I decided to write down what I was going to do each day to get better. Because
Oh,
I knew that he wouldn't fire me if he could see me getting better.
okay.
And so my idea at the time is if I can just get 1% better each day. I probably heard it in a book. I probably read it somewhere, but I had that idea.
Yep.
And so what I started with is I started with a spreadsheet. It's actually a spreadsheet I use still to this day with all my clients and my programs.
Mm.
And and I wrote down what I was going to do each morning. And for me at that time, I was like 50 push-ups, 25 pull-ups, 50 sit-ups, and I was going to wake up and I was going to do those things in the morning. And eventually I did those for a couple weeks, then I added another one. I was reading for 10 minutes and then I added another one, and slowly each day I started to get better and I started to change the identity I had about not being a hard
Mm.
worker, about being
Yes.
lazy, about not being intelligent, and I started to transition it with my actions, but also the recognition and realization of what I was actually receiving from the world because I wasn't even seeing it. I wasn't even accepting it. My identity
Yes.
was so strong of being someone unintelligent. When people would give me compliments, it was like they would go in one ear and out the other. But anytime someone gave me a negative feedback, it was like it stuck with me and it proved to me my identity. So that
Yeah.
moment was a complete transition for me and recognizing, okay, I got to get better. I got to change.
What I think is so brilliant, and I don't even know whether you did this intentionally or not, but you said it earlier in this conversation about how you didn't keep your word to yourself. And so it's almost so interesting that the beginning of you being on the path into your power was doing things that nobody else could see. Nobody's watching you do the push ups, nobody's watching
Yes.
you do the pull ups. But you were, it's, I really would have thought that you would have made a spreadsheet to be like, I'm going to start reading this development book and start doing that and make it all career related, but intuitively you just knew to work on yourself behind the scenes, and that helped you believe that you were worthy. Then when people started complimenting you, that paradigm shift allowed for you to
Yes.
start receiving that. That's freaking brilliant.
I felt like everything had to change. It was like
Wow.
spring cleaning. It was like everything's got to go. I got to be a different person because the person I had been being a year before, I'm in a bunch of street fights. I'm not
Mm,
getting any women. I'm not making any money. I don't have good relationships with my parents and my family. It was just, there was no measure of success in my life. And so
mm,
I saw where that path was going. I saw who I
yeah.
was going to become if I stayed on it. And this was the opportunity for me to not lose the one thing I had going for me, the job, but then also
Mm.
to say, I need to transform this whole dude.
Yes. I still think it's really radical that, like, obviously you're a man who has already built a business and sold it. You have had a proven record with business. You have a proven record with women. You have a proven record with being in really good shape. And yet, this is how everything has started. I still think it's so interesting that the contrast is so huge. So, tell us what happened next. Like, how this corporate job happened, you had this really awakening conversation by this guy who did you a huge favor and really
Yes.
helped you change. What happened after that?
Yeah. So things started to change quickly. And I think when you change mindset and identity and you mix it with accountability, things happen quickly. And
Wow.
so within 9 months, I was the top performer on the team. I had the most amount of clients I was managing. Within a year and a half, I believe, might even been a little bit less, I was now managing the team. I'm making over six figures. And then Eventually, I'm opening up an office in London. I'm opening up a new part of this office in London for us. And so that was kind of the transition. It happened quickly, and it was an identity level change mixed with that daily action, that daily discipline. And I went from like making $28,000 a year at this job, barely hanging on to it, to like all of a sudden I'm making 120K a year, and I'm living in London. I'm living in a penthouse. And at this time, I had been also simultaneously, maybe 3 or 4 months in, I started doing cold approach as well. I started going and talking to women because I recognized and realized that like I'm terrible at this. I have no results in that area of my life. Now my business is getting better, my body's getting better. Let me do that as well. And so actually that one thing I did by doing the cold approach, which is just speaking to women in the street, that
Mm,
allowed me to ramp up everything in my life. It was like steroids for everything in my life, because ultimately, I mean, a lot of women don't understand this. The biggest fear a man has, no matter what any man says, is to go up sober and go speak to women in the
mm,
daytime, at a lunch table, in a cafe,
yes.
in a restaurant. This is like
Yes.
the most scary thing men can do on a regular basis. And so I just started stepping into fear daily, daily. And I was doing one a day. And so as I started to step into fear there, it allowed me to step into fear in my job as well. And ultimately, the thing that holds all of us back from that next level is fear. And so now I'm stepping into fear daily with this cold approach, which is scarier than what I step into on the business. And so it just started to ramp everything up for me. Everything in life just started to change. I started to feel this frequency of being a man who's willing to do hard things, and then also
Mm,
not kicking my own ass in my head, because I saw how I did that for 24 years of my life and it brought me nowhere.
yes. I'm glad that we talked about the career part of things because I think a lot of the listeners or people watching are interested in how you became the person who was able to build a successful business and sell it. So
Yep.
that's really cool. But then now you're bringing up the issue of women and you were doing these cold approaches. Is this how you got good with women? Because clearly, one of the things that a lot of people say is that your texting game is fire. You obviously have the ability to walk up to women. I've heard people say that they've watched you do it and do it successfully. Is this how this all started?
Yeah, ultimately for me, this was the beginning of it. My roommate, when I moved out of the drug dealer house and I moved into the
Yes.
apartment with my buddy, he was 6'2", good looking dude, bartender, so he's
Mm.
making good money. He has
Mm.
access to a lot of women. He's having more threesomes than I'm even getting numbers of women. And I was trying. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, it wasn't that I wasn't trying. He was just
No.
crushing it. And what I realized at that moment
Wow.
is what society had told me women want and what they respond to was not true. And so here I was,
What?
like the nice guy delivering flowers, doing all this stuff. And ultimately, I'm
Sure.
getting run over, and I'm getting the women who are at the bar at the end of the night drunk and they're just going to kiss anyone or go home with anyone.
Sure. Sure.
No success at that. And so
Mm.
I treated it like sales. I treated it like a skill. And I said, like, I can blame the world. I can blame that I'm 5'6". I can blame that I'm out of shape. I can blame that I don't look that good, or I can just
Mm.
start to do this each and every day. And so, yeah, it was the complete difference maker for me, was starting to do this each and every day, approaching women. I did this for years, and it completely changed the way I interact with women, the way I text women, the way I hold relationships with women. It took me from not being able to get girls to, at one point when I was in the thick of it, it was like dating 6 girls at a time, which at that time was cool for me in my late 20s. But now I'm like,
Sure.
I don't want that. But
No. No.
that was the measure of success in that pillar. So it happened through taking action in that way.
Okay, so two things. One, I think it's really encouraging to hear that from you because a lot of guys, including myself, would just think, oh, guys are either like naturally smooth. That's just who they are. So they're good with
Yep.
women, or guys are not. But you're literally saying that you were able to work on this, practice this as if it was a skill like sales and become better at it. And I
Yes.
think you saying that brings a lot of hope to guys who want to be able to be successful in approaching the kind of high quality or attractive women that they really want to when right now they just don't feel like they can. That's a really cool thing. The second thing is you mentioned the word pillar. And so I'd love for you to elaborate on that a little bit because we talked about a lot of different things, but you mentioned the word pillar there.
Yeah. Yeah. So pillar is really important. In all my programs, we focus on the 5 pillars of the masculine life, and they are in order. And the first one is your mindset. So your internal talk. what you believe
Gotcha.
about yourself. The
Mm.
second pillar is your body, your connection. How do you feel? How do you show up in your body? How do you feel when you're walking into rooms? How does your body look? What's your athleticism
Mm.
like? And
Wow.
then the third one is your business slash mission. And so the business and mission is like, these are the three priorities as a man. It's first your mindset, then it's your body, then it's your
Yep.
mission
Yep.
and what you're doing and what you're building. And then the fourth one are your relationships. And so
Mm.
this is with women, this is with friends, this is with everyone. This is your relationship pillar. And then the fifth one is adventure. And the reason why this is so important is one thing I realized in my life as I was transforming myself is that most men, their ego hides in two or three pillars. So I'll give you an example. There's the bartender who bangs a lot of chicks, but
Mm.
he's out of shape. Or there's the guy who goes to the gym all the time. He's in shape, he makes good money, but he doesn't know what he's doing with women and always gets hurt and run over or always dates women way lower quality than him.
Gotcha. Yes.
Or there's
Yes.
the rich guy who gets girls, but he's out of shape, right? So there's always these different things. And what I recognized in
Yeah.
building myself and then also building other men is that we have to focus on all five pillars. And the reason why is not necessarily for the end result of each pillar, but it's to always be overcoming resistance, stepping into fear, and overcoming our own
Wow.
ego. That makes
Yes.
sense?
Damn, yeah. I mean, that's very relevant to the path into power because I think the path into power is not being more egotistical, but having that mindset, like you just said, of being willing to step into fear and do the hard things and become better at it. I don't know whether you intended for this or not, but as you were naming the pillars, I kind of laughed in my head because that's the sequence of how the story has gone so far
Yes.
with your mindset being changed, with your body being changed, with your mission or your career being changed, with women being changed. I think it's just fascinating and very relevant.
Yeah, I do too. A lot of men are heroes in a certain pillar, right? Like
Yes.
a lot of guys I interact with are like seven-figure year entrepreneurs, high six
Mm.
figures, seven figures, some eight figures as well. So these guys are making a couple $1 million a year in their business, and they hide a lot of their ego in that. It's like they feel very proud of that, but the reality is, if you took away their business, they would be a shell of themselves because they put all of their
Mm.
self worth, all of their value in that. Or it's the same guys who are at the gym. They have their body, but what happens if their body gives out?
Yep.
And then they don't feel confident. They're a shell of themselves. And so I think the path of a man into his power is ultimately the journey of continuing to step into fear and discomfort and building himself across each of these different pillars. Because so many guys say, like, I'm not focused on women right now, I'm just focused on business. No, you're scared. You're scared. And
So
that's
true.
fine because we all are scared unless we take action every single day or every single week in our pillars.
Yes. Wow. I mean, I feel a little bit called out right now in a good way. Like I'm feeling the fire inside of me to be like, I can't make excuses about certain things, or the me not doing certain things or addressing certain pillars is an excuse, and that's what
Yes.
it is. It's just an excuse. I want to move into a little bit of your story of how you then built your business and sold it, and what happened with all of that. Can you share with us that?
Yeah, I can. So my journey, I got the office job. I started to excel in it. I was getting better and better. Things were happening really well. I'm making six figures. I moved to London at that time. I had a sweet, beautiful Swedish girlfriend that I met from cold approach. Started a
Okay.
relationship, and
Wow.
and so her and I, she was living in California at the time. Her and I moved to London, and I was working there, and I felt deep down in myself, right. I started to get more of that safety and that comfort of having the job, but I always had this urge to travel, to do more, to see the world, and I
The
held back.
adventure.
Yeah,
Sounds like it's
adventure,
the
the
adventure
adventure
pillar.
pillar,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay. Mm.
And I held back for a long time because I still had some of that belief of maybe I just got lucky with this job. I think I'm intelligent, but not that intelligent. And so that was kind of the next mountain for me, was to leave the job and start to travel the world and build businesses. And so
Wow.
I did that. And I found myself in Medellin, Colombia. I ended up building an e-commerce business with a partner of mine. 6 months into it, we were making 150K a month, having massive
Damn.
success, and I felt empty. I
Oh,
felt a bit empty. I felt like this is really cool, but what you realize when you're making that type of money is that everyone else is working. and everyone else is doing other things, and the products we were selling were like cheap Chinese products. I just didn't really feel good morally about it either. um,
Sure.
and so him and I ended up selling that business, and we took a trip at one point a little bit before this, but to the Amazon, and that trip completely changed my life. Him and I, me and my business partner, went there for a month, and we lived with a group of indigenous people. So people who still live
Oh,
like hunter
interesting.
gatherers. 90% of their food still come from hunting and gathering. And so that
Oh,
experience
wow.
was fascinating for me. You know, here I am, I'm traveling the world, I'm trying to build businesses, I'm really just focusing a lot on sleeping with a lot of
Yeah.
women. And here I go, I get thrown into this like incredibly difficult and beautiful lifestyle in the middle of the Amazon jungle. I connected with these people really deeply. And at that time, I really recognized and realized like, hey, I'm 27 years old now. Like, what is the meaning to my life? Right now, all it is how many hot chicks I can get and how much money I make each month. And it was a clear wake up call for me having that experience.
Interesting. It's almost like you're having a midlife crisis, but more like a quarter life crisis. Most people would just buy a sports car and go do something and have their own adventure. But you went to the Amazon. Where did that idea even come from? It feels so random to me, even though it was clearly very profound. But I guess where did it come from? And then what did you get out of it?
You know, it's funny, like I've always had some type of connection with indigenous cultures. Like when I was a kid, I was always kind of obsessed with Native Americans. And so
Oh,
at this point in life, you know, my buddy and I are traveling and we're in Medellin, Colombia, and we were pushing on the adventure pillar. We had understood the five pillars at that time and we were due for an adventure. And he said, what do you want to do? You know, we can go hike Machu Picchu or you can do this or that. And I was like, let's go fucking live in the Amazon with a tribe. And like it just
wow.
came out of me and he looked at me, you know, he's like, what are you saying?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but he's resourceful, really intelligent guy. And he was like, okay, well, let me see what I can do. And he
Oh,
contacted someone he knew who had
okay.
been working with indigenous tribes for the last, I think, 25 years. She had been doing it. And so
Wow.
she was kind of the gateway into living with them. And we are the third and fourth Westerners to actually ever live with this tribe. They only had two other people,
Whoa.
Westerners, that had ever lived with
What the
them at this
heck?
point. Yep.
Damn, that's so cool. So then how long were you there? What happened that allowed you to feel like you had this awakening because you shared that it isn't just about money and women, there must be something more. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we went in and it was spectacular. You have to rent like a small Cessna to fly in there, and you fly in, you
Yeah.
land at a runway, and then we
Yeah.
took a canoe. So it was like a 36 to 48-hour trip from Colombia just to get into the
What?
this part of the Amazon. And
Oh
so
wow.
it was a life-changing experience though. Like just seeing the way they lived, the connection with the forest, the connection with each other, the quality of the lifestyle, the quality of the relationships. And one of the big things that happens there in the Amazon is there's a lot of exploitation of trees, minerals, and oil. And
Oh.
so something that happened by the end of the trip is the chief and I were talking. We brought in a translator with us, and he said, like, hey, I want your help. We're a democratic tribe, and a lot of people are voting to sell our land to these
Oh.
companies. And so here I was at 27 again, traveling the world, partying, doing all this stuff. And I have a tribe of like 180 people. And the chief saying, like, hey, you're like one of our only bridges for help. Can you help us?
Oh, interesting.
And so I had built a deep connection with him. They'd really looked out for us a lot. They'd really taken care of us.
Wow.
Like our life was in
Yes.
their hands when we lived there.
I'm
And so
sure.
I felt it was my responsibility at some level to help them, and that kind of led to the next phase, which was really deeper mission and purpose.
Wow, that's fascinating. That would have been exactly what you needed at that time.
Yeah.
So then what happened after that? Like you said you had that business, you sold that business, you went to the Amazon, you did find purpose. What did you
Yes.
do with that newfound purpose?
Well, the only thing I really knew outside of kind of the e-commerce business we had is I knew digital marketing. That was the job I had previously. And so I came out of the Amazon. I want to help them raise money. I was doing some consulting on the side for digital marketing. I
Mm,
didn't sell
okay.
that business for a lot of money previously. And so I go to California. I'm in California where I'm originally from, and I'm pitching to like Rotary groups and Lions clubs. I'm trying to get people to raise money to help
Mm,
support them, because ultimately, if
yes.
they get a certain amount of money, they can get the books, they can get the clothes, they can get the supplies they need, so the parents don't feel like they have to sell their land. But what
Oh,
I
I see.
realized after like 3 to 5 months of trying to get money is that one, I hate asking for money, and two, I'm not
Yes.
good at it. And it's such a poor way, being an entrepreneur at that time, it's such a poor way to actually make progress. And so an idea came to me at one point where I said, hey, this small little digital marketing consultancy I have, what if I focus it all around supporting them? I want
Oh.
mission, I want purpose. So let me change the purpose of this company to help support them. And so my business partner and I met, we talked a lot. We changed the name to Sacha, which is the Quechua word, the language they speak, to the forest. The forest is their
Oh.
home. It holds everything for them. And yeah, so we changed the name, and then we made a commitment to reinvesting 15% of our profits into
And
helping protect their land and improving their way of life. And so that was the business I eventually built over the next couple of years.
mm,
My business partner and I built. I bought him out at some point along that phase. And then
yeah.
at the end of 2020, I sold that business and kind of moved forward from there.
Wow. Okay. So, what was it like having a business that you didn't feel like that was much purpose in selling it versus now this other business which you felt purpose in and then selling it?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is like this was closer to purpose, right? We had a mission I was passionate
Yep.
about helping them. I was passionate about protecting their land. I was passionate about my team. But ultimately, the day to day things I was doing, I didn't want to keep talking about search engine optimization. I didn't want to talk about things
Mm,
like
yeah.
website
Yeah.
optimization. And what I realized over that time, there was purpose and there was mission in that, but it wasn't my superpower. I was good at
Yes.
it. I could do it. I can make great money, but it wasn't my superpower. And so what happened is
Yes.
I was kind of going through this turmoil at that time. And it's so interesting how life works. I was going through this turmoil of like, man, I've made this commitment to them, but I'm passionate about our mission, but I'm not passionate about the work I do day to day. And just kind of like
Yeah.
wanting something different and feeling the burden of responsibility. And COVID hits. I don't go in to see them for that year. And they ended up breaking the agreement we had. The
Oh
community,
no.
because we didn't have the
Really?
influence there, they ended up selling part of their land to, I believe it
Oh
was a logging
no.
company at that time.
Sure.
And so that was the commitment I had with them is like, I'm going to keep supporting
Wow.
you
Sure, sure.
if you don't do that. And they did it. And so even though it was a net loss for the environment, personally for me, it was a win because it took the shackles off of me. It
Sure.
took the golden
Yes.
handcuffs off of me. And I said, okay,
Yes,
well,
yes.
I want to go do something I'm really passionate about. And I made the decision to sell my
Mm,
business. Had a really nice exit that I left with. And at that
yes.
time, I signed the contract on December 24th, 2020. And then 5 days later,
Wow.
or 5 or 6 days later, I took a flight down to Brazil and decided I was going to chill for a bit. I was going to connect
Yeah.
with myself, and whatever I was going to do next was going to be fully aligned with purpose, passion, mission.
And what a great segue into this because we're obviously here because you're doing incredible work with men. You are changing lives. People are experiencing transformation. The men's work element of this is so huge. And I feel like you've lived two or three lives already because at one point I was hoping that you would get into this men's work thing, but you haven't. Talked about everything else besides
Yes.
working with men. So tell us how then this started. How did working with men start?
It actually started a long time ago, but it was like one thing that I find oftentimes when I'm helping people with their purpose and their mission is that the things that are so close to them, it's hard to see because
Mm,
it comes so naturally. You think it's just a part of you. And so for most of my life, I've always been more of a leader type in the groups I was in.
yep.
And at
Surprise,
some point when I
surprise.
was traveling, at some point when I was traveling the world and doing more of the pickup and doing the self development and getting in shape and building businesses, I kept meeting guys who were what I called on the path. So they were
Yes.
on the path as well. They were building their pillars. And so I'd meet these epic dudes in Italy. We'd go do cold approach together. We'd talk business. We'd
What?
work out. And I'm like a lot of people don't want to drink beer and watch football all the time. A lot of people don't want to
Yes.
watch TV shows after work. There's a lot of men who want to push it to the next level. And what I found is that
Mm,
like I was finding a tribe of men who wanted to do that all around the world. And I didn't find them in my hometown, but I was finding them when I'm traveling and I'm finding them online. And so I had this idea of just putting them all in a Facebook group. And so at that
oh,
time, I just created a Facebook group. I started adding them all in. I started doing calls every once in a while with them. And this was like complete passion project, not even thinking about making money or anything. And so at one point,
interesting.
I messaged the group and I'm like, hey, I'm going to host, I want to bring everyone together like a mastermind, and I'm going to do it in New
Yes.
York in a couple months. Whoever wants to come, come. I'm not going to charge you any money. We just all have to pitch in equal for the apartment that we're going to rent. And so 15 guys from all around the world showed up.
What? Oh, that's so cool.
It was amazing. It was amazing. 15 guys showed up from all around the world for 5 days. We went in, we talked personal development, we did cold approach, we talked
Wow.
business, business partnerships were made. And everyone was like, damn, this is like so powerful. You should do this. But at this time, I'm like, there's no coaches at this time. You know, it's like 2016, 2017 or whatever. Like, there's just not, I didn't even know there was really a career for that.
Yes.
And so a year went by, I did it again, and same thing. And this one was even more powerful. And some other guys came, and we all met from around the world. And then at this point, it was like, they were like, you gotta do this. And
Mm,
so I just kept thinking, okay, I'll do this, but let me like build my agency first. And then, so eventually I built the agency, I sold it, and then I sat on the idea for a while because truthfully, the thing that is closest to our heart, the thing that we're probably most destined to do is the scariest thing we could possibly do in the world.
wow. And what full circle? Because you talked earlier about the things that are related to a man being in his power are the things that are uncomfortable or scary. You mentioned that related to your tracker. You mentioned that related to cold approach and talking to women. There seems to be this trend or this theme of doing things that are scary. And this was another one of them. You were scared to continue or to do this thing related to working with men.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it was the fear of like, how would I look if I started talking about men and women online? Like, how would I be
Oh.
perceived? You know, I had built up an identity in my last business. I was featured in Forbes, I was featured in Entrepreneur. Like, I was a respected person in society, right? Like, I had a lot of
Mm.
high value people on LinkedIn who respected my opinion. I worked with Fortune 500 brands in my last business and Fortune 200 brands. And so there was this idea of, do I really want to be this coach at this time?
Yes.
And it was scary. It was scary. It was my ego. And so at that point, I'm in Rio and I don't know what I'm going to do. I sold my business. I don't need to work for the next couple years. And I'm spending my days
Mm.
hanging out on a beach.
Wow.
And I told myself, I'm not going to work for like 6 months. I'm just going to chill because I know how I am and I'll be creating something to avoid connecting with myself.
Interesting.
And so what happened 2 months after this is that it was probably the hardest and lowest and darkest time in my life.
Wow. Which is so odd because you're like living the dream. You're free from a business. You just made a ton of money. You're living in Brazil. I'm guessing there's probably close to a beach and something like that. And yet you
Yeah.
are miserable. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, it was, there's no place worse than being miserable in paradise. That's a different type of
Whoa.
that's a different type
Damn.
of
Okay.
hell.
Yes.
And yeah,
Wow.
at that time I was surfing, I was doing jujitsu, I was working out, I was dating the most beautiful woman I'd ever met, and everything seemed incredible. But what was happening is that all the emotions that I had hid as a man, all of the hurt I had hid as a man over the years, I buried it like a lot of entrepreneurs do in my business. I just was busy, or I hadn't
Okay.
resolved that trauma within me. And when I had
Oh.
this space, it just all
Mm.
started to rise to the surface. All of these
Mm.
emotions, all of these feelings, all this lack of worthiness, things from my childhood, it was just all coming up. And so it became a process of me going down a different path of becoming whole with myself.
Wow. And you didn't have a career or something to distract you with. You really had to face it. What was facing that like?
Oh, it was difficult, man. I didn't have any distractions. I didn't have, as an entrepreneur, oftentimes we get a lot of like our own self worth and our own confidence from like achieving or from team members needing things from us or from people, Forbes telling you you're an amazing entrepreneur, amazing
Wow.
person
Yeah,
makes you
that's
feel
right.
good. And then all of a sudden
Yeah.
you're in this place where there's no team. I'm in a foreign country by myself. I'm dating a girl, but like I'm not sharing this with her right away. We're just starting to date. And I felt alone on this island, man. And what I realized during this time is that it's not about the end result. So many people, especially online, and so many guys are like, when I can make $1 million, when I can do this, when I can do that, then I'm going to be happy. And what I realized in that moment
Yeah.
is that it's never, and I know some people believe they have to experience this for themselves, and I hope they don't, but it's not the end destination.
Yep.
Being
Yep.
on the yacht with the girls, which we did a lot, me and my best friend in Rio, isn't it. It's actually the purpose and the thing you're building. And I got caught in that illusion. I got caught in the illusion of like, let me make the money, let me sell my business, and then life's going to be
Yep.
great. But what I recognized and realized is that it's an everyday process about loving
Mm-hmm.
the process, about loving the experience. And it really changed my paradigm completely as a man from, okay, success and money and all of this, those are all good things to have. But actually, the most
Yes.
important thing to really give you what you're looking for, because you're looking for that wholeness, that connection with self, that
Yes.
peace, that love, that joy for life, that comes from acting through purpose. It doesn't come from, at that time I was getting like $25,000 in this month when I'm going through this, passively dropping in my bank account when I have hundreds of
Damn.
thousands of
Sure.
dollars sitting in it. And it's like
Yes.
making passive money sitting on a beach is not what life is about. It's about giving your
No.
full purpose and your full soul and energy to whatever that thing is that you're meant to give to the world. And for me, I
Yes.
believe it's the work I do with men.
Well, I just need to stop right now because, like, what a crazy paradigm shift. I'm sure everybody who's listening or watching right now probably wants to rewind the last 2 or 3 minutes and listen to that again because that is a massive illusion that I think a lot of us have of like, oh, I will be happy when this thing
Yes.
happens, or I will go and find my purpose when I've achieved this thing. And then you literally just exposed that whole fallacy for what it really is. And I agree with you. I hope people don't have to experience that for themselves because you very generously shared the lie that that is and your experience going through it.
Yes, completely. And it's changed like even the work I do, like so much of the work I do is it's about helping men level up in those 5 pillars, but really at the core it's about helping them figure out who they are and what they are meant to be doing. And ultimately
Mm,
when a man's on purpose, he doesn't need to seek pleasure. He doesn't need to seek distraction because he gets that wholeness from himself. And
yep.
I wouldn't have believed that a long time ago. I was chasing the 6 figure months. I was chasing 150K a month and making that and being able to be in a dope apartment and be able to take girls out on yachts. I was chasing all those things. But once you get them, you realize that what you're really seeking and what you're really chasing is self transcendence.
Interesting.
Do you know who Abraham Maslow is?
Yes. Yeah. He has the hierarchy of needs, right?
Yes, he has a hierarchy of needs. And so, what I learned through this time is a lot of people, it's that pyramid, right? You need safety and security, then you need love and relationship, and then you need self
Yes.
actualization. I think I'm missing one of them in there, but a lot of people think life is about self actualization, becoming the best version of yourself, but I don't believe it is. And what I experienced in this time is that me and Rio, I had actualized. I had created the life
Mm,
that I had been dreaming of for years. I had the girl I wanted. I'm living in the apartment I want. I have the money I want. I get to do whatever I want all day. But that's not what life is about. And what I started to understand through this time is that you watch a movie like Braveheart, right? You watch The
mhm.
Gladiator. What is really happening here? Why is William Wallace willing to die for a cause? It's because he has gone through self transcendence.
Wow.
Self transcendence is what Abraham Maslow discovered before he died. He used to have his pyramid that
Mm.
stopped at self-actualization. And then before he died, he said there's a level higher. There's a level
What?
where you are so on purpose that you're willing
Yes.
to die, to kill yourself, or to die for a cause that is bigger than
Wow.
yourself. Martin Luther King,
Yes.
Mahatma
Yes.
Gandhi, William
Yes.
Wallace, all of these
Yes.
people were willing to sacrifice themselves for a gift, a thing bigger than
Mm.
themselves. And what I realized in that moment is I had actualized myself in some ways. I always have growth. I wasn't some enlightened being, but I had
Sure.
actualized
Sure.
my potential in a certain way. And it wasn't
Yes.
it. And so, what
Yeah.
I'm stepping into now and what I really help guys with now is self transcendence. What is the
Mm.
mission and what is the purpose that is so much bigger than yourself that you're not worried about how much money will come in? And then,
Yes.
inversely, more money will come in than you've ever had in your life. You're
Mm.
worried about the mission. And when you can be so focused on the mission, it speaks to the masculine soul like nothing I have ever seen in my life. And it is the most powerful thing that I see. And when I see guys find it and step into it, it's like
Yes.
rocket ship, purpose,
Wow.
passion. The money comes. A woman can feel when
Yes.
you're in that power. You're
Yes.
radiating a different energy. And so yeah, I went off on a tangent, but that's what I recognized over this period of time is that I had to move from self-actualization, meaning it's all about me and what I can get, to
Mm.
self-transcendent, and it's all about what I
Yes.
can give to the world and to the cause and to the mission that I have. And once I did that, everything in my life changed.
I feel like an emotional mess right now because a part of me is really inspired, but another part of me is really frustrated because this isn't the kind of conversation that men are having. Like in this modern society, when we're talking about men or masculinity, I'm not seeing this type of passion or conversation or even addressing this thing of self transcendence. I think we need to address this elephant in the room of like, what's going on? Why are we not having these conversations? Because we've clearly had these great examples. You mentioned Martin Luther, William Wallace, all these men who did think and live this way. And yet, this is not the norm of modern men thinking and operating this way. What's going on, Alan?
I think it's the illusion, right? It was the illusion that I was caught in. A lot of men are caught in this illusion. I have no problem with financial success, but I think so many men are believing this thing of when I get to the money, to some level of money, then I'm going to be worthy. Then I'm going to be worthy of that life. And so I don't think money's evil at all, but I think the pursuit of money for itself is evil. And the
Yes.
reason why is because you miss out on the true gift that this life has. And
Yeah,
right
yeah,
now, the
yeah.
masculine figures that everyone's seeing, right, even today, Andrew Tate talks about a lot of good things. But what is Andrew Tate really showing more than anything? Get the car, get the nice house, get the cigar, the fancy clothes. It's an illusion. And it's an illusion that will keep men on a hamster wheel of life of trying to make more and more money. I have clients right now who make $20 million dollars a year. My clients are still saying one day when I sell my business for 100 million, then I'll finally feel like the fucking man.
What? That's a
No, you were saying the same thing when you're making 5K a month. One day when I make 25K a month, then I'll feel like the fucking man.
yes,
Now you're making 2
exactly.
million a month and you still don't feel like the man because you're chasing an illusion that is not real.
Wow, this is deep.
And that thing that so many men are chasing today, and it's all the masculine heroes online. They're all spouting off the same thing and showing the same thing. It's great to have nice things. It's great to have financial success. But the real gift in life is to find a cause and a purpose that you are willing to die for.
Mm.
Why does Braveheart speak to the masculine soul? Why does the gladiator speak to the masculine soul? It's because it is deep masculine truth.
Yes.
We are here for something bigger than us. We are not here to just actualize ourselves, to hoard as much cheese like a rat in a hole as we can so we feel good about ourselves.
Yes.
We are
Yes.
here to become transcended into our highest being. And the only way we become transcended into our highest being is by following our path. It's the reason why my company is called The Path.
That makes so much sense because I've seen guys who have been successful with pickup and then there's still emptiness. You're obviously mentioning guys who are making a lot of money and there's still emptiness, or guys who go on wild adventures and they're doing all these crazy stuff, but there's still emptiness. And it's just really strange because that those things you would think speaks to the masculine soul, but it's not. It's what you're saying. This high, deep sense of purpose, this self transcendence is what speaks to the masculine soul. So I want to come full circle on this because a lot of the guys who go through your program experience transformation.
Yep.
And I feel like I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I'm kind of seeing that this might be why guys are getting this transformation. Why do you think that when they go through this 9 week program, so much change has happened?
Yeah. Great question. I think at its core, it's because they are excavating the true them. And so much of personal development today is about building. I'm going to build you into a high value man. I'm going to build your skills with women. But actually, our most powerful form is by excavating who we are into the world. And when I say excavation, what do I mean? Cutting away the parts that are not us. When you were born, John, at 2 years
Mm,
old, you were unique. You had a unique spark about you. And
yes,
somewhere
I
over
see what you mean.
time, you were programmed on how you should be, should behave,
Absolutely.
should act.
Yes.
And I believe our life as a human being here is not a process of creation. It's more of a process of remembering and excavation.
Wow.
And so excavating the true person, the best you with women is not you reading some book on pickup and learning some other dude's tactics. The best you with women is removing the blockers and barriers within yourself that prevent you from fully stepping into your truest, most powerful self with the world and with women. And what I just said about women applies to business, it applies to relationships, it applies to every area of your life.
It's so true because I know from personal experience from when I was younger, I would use something like alcohol to get rid of the other things that were preventing me from being my true self. People joke about it being like a truth serum or whatnot, but that's such a cheap and like temporary fix that doesn't really get to the core of the problem. I'm seeing this real excavation as something that's really necessary for a lot of men.
Yes. And to go back to your question, why does transformation happen? In all the groups I've done, there's maybe one client who didn't transform. He would even say he
Mm.
transformed, but from the way I look at it, didn't transform. And it's because when a man gets introduced to himself and he recognizes and realizes the negative programming and the trauma that he's still holding in his body, and when he removes it to become more whole and aligned with self, there's no way his life can't transform.
Yes. Wow, that's so true. Now, before I wrap things up and ask you how people can find you, because I'm sure a lot of men are now really curious and they want to hop on a call with you to find out more about this program and what they can do for themselves. Is there any part of your story that you didn't have a chance to share that you wanted to share with us before we wrap up?
Yeah, just one thing, that time I talked about in Rio when I was really going through it. One of the core things I learned, and I think it's really important for men to hear this, I wish I would have known this, is that every time something traumatic happens to us, it is not only stored in our mind, it's also stored in our body. It's stored energetically, somatically in our body. There's a book that goes into the science of this. It's called The Body Keeps the Score. And so, what was
Yes.
happening at that time in Rio is I had already done 2 years of therapy. I had already worked through a lot of my mental trauma, a lot of my mental garbage. But because I had this space, all of it was coming up through my body. And so a lot of guys say, oh, I'm already doing therapy. And it's like, okay, well, that's 50% of the battle. And maybe even more
Yes.
like 40%, to be honest.
Holy shit. That's so true.
And so the process of really becoming into wholeness with self, and it's a phrase I'm going to keep using, stepping in your power, being confident, knowing who you are, knowing where you're going, loving the man you are, having massive success happens from actually being able to clear out your body to become in full alignment with not only your mind, your body, but also your spirit and your soul. And so
Powerful.
that was my journey of going into bad health. The worst my health ever got was after I sold my business, because all of the trauma and energy that had been stored in my
What?
body for 32
Yes.
years at that time all came up and arrived.
Damn. So you would think that you'd be on a high, but you actually went into a low because you had to experience all of that. And then how did you get out of that? How did you, because you seem pretty healthy now.
Yeah, it was a year-long journey of working and understanding the body, understanding how to release trauma from the body, understanding how to
Wow.
heal the body. And it was one of the deepest dives I've ever done. I spent tons of money on coaches, tons of money on supplements, tons of time and energy on myself. It was pretty much my full-time job, is to understand that. And then that transitioned as I started coaching people into just understanding how to release it from men as well. A client of mine, Joseph, who stands out as such a clear example, where like at the beginning of the program, he's so anxious in his body. Like so many men are anxious. I call it anxious body. They can't sit still. They can't be deeply present with a woman. They're always moving
Mm.
because they haven't resolved that trauma in their body. And it's so interesting. Over 8 weeks, you then see the next video of him, and he's like skinnier, like more chiseled, calm, confident. It's just because he was able to release all that trauma that he was holding in his own body.
This sounds like massive value for not just learning things, which a lot of programs do. It doesn't sound like this at all. This sounds like a very experiential program that people experience a complete different result after going through it.
Yep, for sure. For sure.
That's incredible. Going back to this, I'm sure a lot of guys want to reach out to you right now, want to ask more questions or want to learn more about you. First of all, thank you for sharing your story and just being so open and vulnerable. I think something that is so important for men is there isn't often this vulnerability that they share with each other, but you were willing to do it and exemplify what a transformed or transcended man, how they operate. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Cool. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. And to answer your question, the best way to find me on Instagram, Coach Alan Howard. Same thing on YouTube. And then the website is the-path.com. And yeah, you can catch me there. Glad to share. Thank you for doing this interview, John. Thank you for pulling this out of me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm excited to have future conversations and see what else we can talk about.
Let's go.